For 7 years, little Sora Han had never heard a single sound. Not her name, not laughter, not the ocean waves crashing against the cliffs below her father's mansion in Malibu, California. She lived in silence, and everyone said it was permanent. Every specialist at Cedars-Sinai, every private neurologist flown in from New York, every elite pediatric clinic that charged more per hour than most people made in a month, said the same thing. Congenital nerve damage, no cure. Accept it. Her father, Daniel Han, didn't accept anything. But none of his power could make his daughter hear. Then a maid nobody looked at twice noticed something no one else did. And what she pulled from that child's ear will leave you speechless. If you believe this story found you today for a reason, kindly subscribe and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I need to know this message is reaching the right people. The Han mansion sat on 3 acres of prime Malibu coastline like a fortress built to keep the world out. Or maybe to keep the silence in. White stone walls, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting Pacific sunlight, security cameras tracking every shadow, armed guards stationed at gates that opened for exactly 3 vehicles, Daniel's black Maybach, his head of security's Range Rover, and the armored SUV that transported Sora to her endless medical appointments. Nobody else came, nobody else left. The house had 32 rooms. Only 5 were ever used. Daniel Han wasn't just wealthy. He was dangerous. Korean-American shipping magnate on paper. West Coast crime kingpin in reality. Ports from Long Beach to Oakland moved cargo that customs agents were paid not to inspect. Warehouses held freight that manifests never recorded. And a reputation that made even federal prosecutors choose softer targets. But all that power meant nothing when it came to the one thing Daniel couldn't control. His daughter's silence. Sora was 7 years old. Small for her age. Delicate features that came from her mother, high cheekbones, almond eyes, skin like porcelain. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, barefoot on cold marble floors, always alone, always quiet. Not because she chose silence. Because silence chose her. The doctors said she was born this way. Came into the world without the ability to hear it. Congenital sensorineural hearing loss, they called it. Permanent damage to the auditory nerve. Irreversible. The best specialists in 3 countries examined her. Ran tests that cost more than luxury cars. Performed scans in facilities where appointments required 6-month waits unless your last name was Han. Every single one said the same thing. Nothing we can do. Accept it. Learn sign language. Move on. Daniel spent $3.7 million trying to prove them wrong. He flew Sora to Switzerland for experimental stem cell treatments. To Germany for nerve regeneration therapy. To a private clinic in Singapore where a doctor promised breakthrough gene therapy that would restore hearing in 40% of cases. Sora came home still deaf. Still silent. Still touching her left ear with 2 fingers like she was trying to tell someone something they refused to hear. Daniel's wife, Sora's mother, had been a soprano. Lee Yuna. She sang at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, at the Hollywood Bowl, at private galas where tickets cost 5 figures. Her voice could fill a concert hall without amplification. Could make grown men weep during Korean folk songs their grandmothers sang. She died the day Sora was born. Hemorrhaged on the delivery table while surgeons worked frantically to save both mother and child. They managed to pull Sora out breathing. By then, Yuna's heart had stopped. Daniel held his wife's hand as the machines flatlined. Watched the light fade from her eyes. Then looked down at the infant daughter he'd never planned to raise alone and saw that she wasn't crying. Wasn't making any sound at all. The nurses said newborns sometimes came out quiet. Give her a minute. Sora never made a sound. Tests confirmed it 3 days later. Profound bilateral hearing loss. Cause unknown. Prognosis. Permanent. Daniel buried his wife in silence. Raised his daughter in it too. The mansion became a tomb for sound. No music played in rooms where Yuna used to practice scales. No television noise filled the empty spaces. Staff learned quickly. Loud voices meant immediate termination. Laughter was grounds for dismissal. Even footsteps were monitored. She can't hear the world, Daniel told his head of security on the first day. So the world doesn't get to be loud around her. The logic made no sense. But nobody argued with Daniel Han. Sora lived in beautiful isolation. Private tutors came 3 times a week to teach her through sign language and written words. Speech therapists tried to help her vocalize, but you can't learn to speak when you've never heard speech. Physical therapists worked on balance issues that came from inner ear damage. None of them stayed long. Not because Sora was difficult. Because watching a child live in silence while surrounded by everything money could buy was its own kind of torture. And Daniel's grief hung over that house like smoke you couldn't see but couldn't stop breathing. He blamed himself. If he'd taken Yuna to a different hospital. If he'd demanded better doctors. If he'd been less arrogant about his own invincibility, believing money and power could protect the people he loved. Maybe Yuna would still be alive. Maybe Sora would be different. The guilt sat on his chest like a stone he couldn't move. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He spent money. Millions of dollars chasing specialists who made promises they couldn't keep. Flying across continents for treatments that failed. Funding research into regenerative medicine that wouldn't bear fruit for decades. Nothing worked. Nothing changed. And somewhere in all that desperate searching, Daniel stopped seeing his daughter. He saw a problem he couldn't solve. A reminder of everything he'd lost. A 7-year-old girl who looked exactly like her dead mother and lived in the silence that killed her. But Daniel wasn't the only one watching Sora. Someone else had noticed something. Something the million-dollar specialists missed. Something that would either save that child's life or destroy the woman who dared to see it. Her name was Naomi Carter. And she arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, carrying everything she owned in 2 garbage bags and a prayer that this job wouldn't end like all the others. She was 32, black, tired in ways that sleep couldn't fix. She'd answered an ad for a live-in maid posted on a job board that specialized in placements people didn't ask too many questions about. The pay was $600 a week. Cash. No taxes. No background checks. Which was good. Because Naomi's background had problems. The head of security met her at the service entrance. Not the front gates where guests arrived. The back door where help was expected to know their place. His name was Park. Korean. Mid-40s. Built like someone who'd done violence professionally and would do it again without hesitation. He looked Naomi up and down with the kind of assessment that calculated threat levels and found her lacking. You the new maid? Yes, sir. You got ID? Naomi handed over her driver's license. Park photographed it with his phone, ran her name through something. Waited, then nodded. You're clean. Lucky. He led her through the service hallway. White walls. Fluorescent lights. The smell of industrial cleaning products. Nothing like the luxury she'd glimpsed through the iron gates. Rules, Park said without looking back. You work 6 days. Sunday off. You sleep in the staff quarters near the laundry. You eat after the family eats. You don't use the front entrance. You don't speak to Mr. Han unless he speaks first. And most important, he stopped, turned. His eyes were flat, cold. You don't talk to the child. You don't touch the child. You don't even look at the child unless you're cleaning a room she's in. She's not your concern. She's not your responsibility. You're here to clean. That's it. You understand? Naomi nodded. She'd learned a long time ago that the word yes kept you employed longer than questions. Park showed her to a converted storage room off the industrial kitchen. Narrow bed, small dresser, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. One window that looked out at the service driveway where delivery trucks came. You start at 6 a.m. Mrs. Chen will tell you your duties. Then he left. Naomi sat on the thin mattress and tried not to cry. This was it. This was what desperation looked like. Sleeping in a closet. Taking orders from men who looked at her like she was replaceable. Working for a family she'd never be part of. But she needed this. Needed it more than pride or dignity or the dream she'd once had of something better. Because 3,000 miles away in Detroit, a 12-year-old boy was living with her sister. Waiting for his mother to get stable enough to fight for custody again. And every week Naomi didn't have steady income was another week the state had ammunition to say she wasn't fit. So she unpacked her 2 garbage bags. Hung her 3 uniforms in the small closet. Set her alarm for 5:30 a.m. and lay down in a stranger's house, in a city that didn't want her, working for a man she'd been warned never to cross. She didn't know it yet. But she'd just entered a story that would change 4 lives completely. And it would start with something so small, most people would never notice. A 7-year-old girl touching her ear. Over and over and over. Like she was trying to tell someone. Something's wrong. Something's been wrong for 7 years. And nobody's listening. Naomi woke at 5:30 a.m. to the sound of industrial dishwashers already running. Her first thought was that she'd overslept. Her second was remembering where she was. The storage room was dark. Cold. The kind of cold that came from concrete floors and walls that had never been insulated because nobody cared if the help was comfortable. She dressed quickly in the black uniform Mrs. Chen had left folded outside her door. Cheap polyester that would stick to her skin by noon. Pulled her hair back tight. No jewelry, no makeup, nothing that would make her visible. In Daniel Han's house, invisible was safe. The kitchen staff was already moving when Naomi arrived. Mrs. Chen, head housekeeper, Korean, somewhere in her 60s, barely looked up from the clipboard in her hands. "You're the new girl." "Yes, ma'am. You clean the West Wing today. Guest bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, dust everything, vacuum everything, touch nothing personal. Mr. Han has cameras in every room except the bathrooms and his private office." "You understand?" Naomi nodded. Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed. "I didn't hear you." "Yes, ma'am. I understand." "Good. The family eats at 7. You eat at 8. You don't cross paths with Mr. Han or the child during their breakfast. Stay in the West Wing until they're done." She handed Naomi a key card. "This opens the service doors only. You don't have access to Mr. Han's office, his bedroom, or the child's wing. You need something from those areas, you ask me first." "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment. Looking for something. Weakness maybe. Or the kind of desperation that made people do stupid things. Whatever she saw, it made her voice soften just slightly. "You need this job?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then keep your head down. Do your work. Don't ask questions. People who ask questions don't last here." She turned back to her clipboard. Dismissed. Naomi grabbed the cleaning cart from the supply closet and headed toward the West Wing. The mansion was bigger than any building she'd ever worked in. Hallways that seemed to stretch forever. Rooms that sat empty and perfect like museum displays nobody was allowed to touch. The guest bedrooms were pristine. Beds that had never been slept in. Bathrooms with toilets that had never been used. She dusted furniture that had no dust. Vacuumed carpets that showed no footprints. It felt like cleaning a graveyard. By 8:15, she'd finished 2 rooms and was starting on the 3rd when she heard it. Footsteps. Small ones. She froze. Mrs. Chen had said the child would be eating breakfast with her father. Nowhere near the West Wing. But the footsteps were getting closer. Naomi backed toward the closet. Not hiding exactly. Just making herself small. Unnoticeable. The way she'd learned to survive in spaces where her presence was tolerated but not welcomed. The door opened. Sora Han stood in the doorway. 7 years old. Barefoot. Wearing a white cotton dress that made her look even smaller than she was. Her hair hung loose past her shoulders, black and straight, catching the morning light from the window. She wasn't looking at Naomi. She was looking at the bookshelf on the far wall. Or maybe at nothing. Her eyes had that distant quality that came from living in your own head because the outside world didn't reach you. Naomi stayed perfectly still. The child walked across the room. Her steps were careful, measured, the kind of walking you did when you couldn't hear your own footfalls and had to trust your balance completely. She reached the bookshelf, ran her small fingers across the spines. Not reading the titles, she couldn't hear the words even if she said them aloud. Just touching, feeling textures, finding comfort in something solid. Then she did it, the thing Naomi would replay in her mind 1,000 times over the next 3 weeks. Sora stopped moving, tilted her head slightly to the left, and pressed 2 fingers against her left ear. Not a casual touch, a response to something. Her face tightened, just for a second, a flash of discomfort that she hid quickly because she'd learned that showing pain didn't bring help. It just brought more doctors with more instruments and more tests that never changed anything. But Naomi saw it, saw the wince, saw the way Sora's fingers pressed harder for just a moment before falling away. Saw her take a breath like she was steadying herself against something nobody else could see. Then Sora turned. Her eyes met Naomi's. For one impossible second, they just stared at each other. Woman and child, black and Korean, maid and heiress. Two people who weren't supposed to exist in the same space, forced into it by accident or fate or something neither of them controlled. Sora's expression didn't change, didn't show surprise at finding someone in the room. Didn't show curiosity or fear or anything at all. Just looked. Then she walked past Naomi like she was furniture. Like she'd already learned that staff weren't people. They were part of the house. Functional. Forgettable. The door closed behind her. Naomi stood there holding a dust cloth in hands that had started shaking. That wasn't normal. The way Sora touched her ear, that wasn't a habit. That was a response to stimulus. To sensation. To pain. Naomi had seen it before. Years ago. Different country. Different war. But the same look on a different child's face when something was wrong inside their body and nobody was listening. She thought about her little brother. Darius. Age 9. Detroit, 2008. He'd complained about his ear for months. Touched it constantly. Their mother said it was just wax. Just an infection. Just something that would clear up on its own because the free clinic had a 3-month wait and the emergency room charged $400 just to walk through the door. By the time they finally got him seen, the infection had spread. Mastoiditis. Emergency surgery. 6 weeks of IV antibiotics they couldn't afford. The doctor had said it so casually, if you'd waited another week, he would have died. Like their poverty was the problem. Not the system that made healthcare a luxury instead of a right. Naomi forced herself to keep cleaning. Finish the room. Move to the next one. Do her job. Stay invisible. But she couldn't stop thinking about that touch. That wince. That 7-year-old girl living in a mansion worth more than Naomi would earn in 10 lifetimes, surrounded by people paid to care for her, suffering from something nobody was seeing. Or maybe they saw it. And just didn't care enough to look closer. By the time Naomi finished the West Wing, it was nearly noon. Her back ached from bending. Her hands were raw from chemical cleaners. Her feet hurt in the cheap shoes she'd bought from Goodwill because her last pair had fallen apart during her previous job. She returned the cleaning cart to the supply closet and headed back toward her room. Park was waiting in the hallway. Mrs. Chen tells me you were in the West Wing when the child came through. Naomi's stomach dropped. Yes, sir. I was cleaning the guest room. She walked in. I stayed out of her way. Did you speak to her? No, sir. Did you touch her? No, sir. Park stepped closer. His voice dropped to something quiet and dangerous. Let me be very clear. Mr. Han's daughter is not your concern. Whatever you saw, whatever you think you saw, forget it. You're here to clean, nothing else. The child has doctors, specialists, people whose job it is to care for her. Your job is toilets and floors. You understand the difference? Yes, sir. Good. Because the last maid who got curious about the family's business. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. She's not working in Malibu anymore. She's not working anywhere in California. You want to keep this job, you remember that. He walked away. Naomi stood in the empty hallway, heart hammering, hands still shaking. She should forget it. Should keep her head down. Do her work. Collect her cash every Friday and send it to her sister to prove she was stable enough to deserve her son back. Should stop thinking about a little girl's face when she touched her ear. But that night, lying on her narrow bed in the converted storage room, staring at the cracked ceiling in the dark. Naomi couldn't stop seeing it. Couldn't stop remembering Darius. Couldn't stop thinking, what if nobody's actually looking? What if they're all just assuming? And the question that would change everything. What if I'm the only one who sees? 2 weeks passed like water dripping from a broken faucet. Slow. Endless. Each day bleeding into the next with the same routine. Wake at 5:30. Clean until noon. Eat alone in the kitchen after everyone else finished. Clean again until 6. Return to the storage room. Sleep. Repeat. Naomi learned the mansion's rhythms the way prisoners learned the patterns of their guards. Daniel left every morning at 7. Black Maybach pulling through the gates with 2 security vehicles flanking it. He never came home before midnight. Sometimes not until 3 or 4 in the morning. She knew because she could hear the engines from her room. Could hear Park's voice giving orders in Korean she didn't understand. Sora had tutors 3 times a week. Speech therapy on Mondays and Thursdays. Physical therapy on Wednesdays. The rest of the time she was alone. Moving through that enormous house like a ghost haunting rooms that had never been lived in. And every single day, she touched her left ear. Naomi saw it constantly now that she was looking for it. Saw it when she was dusting the library and Sora came in to arrange books she'd never read aloud. Saw it when she was cleaning the hallway and Sora walked past on her way to another appointment with another specialist who would charge thousands to tell Daniel what he already knew. Nothing we can do. The touching wasn't random. It came in waves. Sometimes Sora would go hours without doing it. Then suddenly she'd stop whatever she was doing, freeze mid-step, and press those two fingers against her ear like she was trying to hold something in. Or push something out. Her face would tighten. Just for a second. Then she'd breathe and continue like nothing happened. But something was happening. Naomi knew it the way she'd known when soldiers were lying about their pain levels in field hospitals. The way she'd known when her brother was getting worse even though he kept saying he was fine. You learned to see suffering when words couldn't carry it. The problem was, nobody else was looking. Mrs. Chen moved through the house like a general inspecting troops. Her focus was on dust and organization. On keeping Daniel's world running smoothly enough that he never had to think about the machinery behind it. Park and his security team watched for threats. External ones. People approaching the property. Vehicles that lingered too long on the coastal road. They scanned horizons, not children. The tutors came and went on schedule. Taught their lessons through sign language and written words. Left detailed progress reports that nobody read. And Daniel? Daniel was a shadow Naomi barely saw. The few times they crossed paths, he looked through her. Not with cruelty. With the kind of unseeing that came from grief so heavy it erased everything else. He was drowning. And his daughter was drowning too. But nobody was throwing a rope because everyone had decided she was already underwater. Had been born that way. Would stay that way forever. Accept it. Move on. Naomi tried to follow Park's warning. Tried to forget what she'd seen. Focus on cleaning. Stay invisible. But on the 16th day, something changed. She was polishing silver in the formal dining room, a room that never got used because Daniel ate in his office or didn't eat at all, when Sora appeared in the doorway. Not walking through, standing there, looking directly at Naomi. Naomi's hands froze mid-polish. Heart hammering, remembering Park's threat. The last maid who got curious isn't working anywhere in California. She should look away. Pretend she didn't see the child. Wait for Sora to leave. But Sora wasn't leaving. She stepped into the room. Slow, deliberate, crossed to where Naomi stood by the sideboard. Up close, she looked even smaller. Even more fragile. 7 years old, but she could have been 5. Thin wrists. Delicate collarbone visible through her dress. Eyes that were too old for her face because suffering aged you faster than time. Sora raised her right hand. Signed something. Naomi didn't know ASL. Had never learned it, but the gesture was clear enough. A question. Sora pointed at Naomi, then at herself, then made a motion, fingers walking through air, and pointed toward the window. Toward the ocean cliffs beyond the manicured lawn. She was asking if Naomi ever went outside. Naomi swallowed. Should she respond? Ignore her? Walk away? Before she could decide, Sora did something that broke every rule. She took Naomi's hand. Her fingers were small. Cold. They wrapped around Naomi's palm with gentle pressure. Not grabbing. Not demanding. Just holding. Like she needed to know someone real was there. Naomi looked down at their joined hands. Black and pale. Rough and soft. Adult and child. If Park walked in right now, she'd be fired. Escorted off the property. Blacklisted from every domestic placement agency in Los Angeles. She should pull away. Instead, she squeezed back. Just once. Just enough to say, I see you. Sora's face didn't change, but her grip tightened slightly. And for maybe 5 seconds, they just stood there in that empty dining room holding hands while morning light poured through windows nobody looked out of. Then Sora let go. Signed something else. Thank you, maybe. Or goodbye. Or nothing that translated into words at all. She walked away. Left Naomi standing there with a silver spoon in one hand and the ghost of a child's grip in the other. That afternoon, Naomi found something on her bed. A folded piece of paper. Thick. Expensive. The kind of stationery that probably cost more than Naomi's entire wardrobe. She unfolded it carefully. A drawing. Done in colored pencil with the kind of precision that came from a child who had endless time and no distractions because the world was silent anyway. Two figures holding hands. One tall, one small. Above them, in careful printed letters, "Thank you." And in the corner, so tiny she almost missed it, a drawing of an ear, with something dark inside it. Naomi's blood went cold. She stared at that drawing, at the detail Sora had put into that darkness. The way she'd shaded it made it look solid, real. She knows something's in there. She's been trying to tell someone, and nobody's been listening. Naomi sat on her bed holding that drawing in shaking hands. She thought about Park's warning, about her son waiting in Detroit, about how desperately she needed this job to prove she was stable enough for custody. She thought about Sora's face when she touched her ear, about 7 years of silence that maybe didn't have to be permanent, about doctors who'd looked at scans and called it irreversible without ever checking if something simpler was wrong. She thought about her brother, about the doctor saying, if you'd waited another week, he would have died. The paper crinkled in her grip. Naomi made a decision that would either save a life or destroy her own. She stood up, walked to her small dresser, pulled out the first aid kit she'd carried since her medic days. Inside, among the bandages and antiseptic, was a small penlight. Hospital grade, bright enough to see details in dark spaces, like ear canals. She turned it on, off, on again, testing. Then she hid it in her uniform pocket and went back to work. Waiting, watching, for the next time Sora touched her ear, for the moment when nobody else was looking, for the chance to do what every instinct screamed was right and every rule said was forbidden. If I'm wrong, she thought, I lose everything. But if I'm right and do nothing, that child loses everything. And Naomi had already lost too much to let silence win again. The moment came 3 days later. Tuesday morning, 9:47 a.m. Naomi was cleaning the second-floor hallway when she heard it. Not a sound exactly, Sora never made sounds. But a thud, heavy, final, the kind of impact that meant someone had fallen and wasn't getting up. Naomi dropped her dust cloth and ran. She found Sora at the bottom of the main staircase, curled on her side on cold marble, both hands pressed against her left ear. Her small body was rigid with pain she couldn't voice, couldn't scream, could only endure in the silence that had always been her prison. Her face was twisted, mouth open in what should have been a cry but came out as nothing. Eyes squeezed shut, tears streaming down her cheeks. And blood, a thin line of it trickling from her ear canal, dark red against pale skin, dripping onto white marble. Naomi's medic training kicked in before thought could stop her. She knelt, checked for head trauma, pupils equal and reactive, no signs of concussion. But Sora was still clutching her ear like something inside was trying to claw its way out. Sora, Naomi whispered, knowing the child couldn't hear. I'm here. You're okay. Sora's eyes opened, found Naomi's face, and in that moment, Naomi saw something that broke her heart. Relief. Not because the pain was gone. Because someone was finally there. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Mrs. Chen appeared first, saw Sora on the floor, saw the blood. Her face went pale. Call 911, she barked at someone behind her. Now, Park came next. 2 security guards behind him. He saw Naomi kneeling beside Sora and his expression went hard. Step away from her. She's bleeding. Something's wrong with her ear. I said step away. More staff gathered. Someone was on the phone with emergency services. Someone else was trying to reach Daniel. The hallway filled with panic and noise that Sora couldn't hear but could feel in the chaos of bodies moving around her. And through it all, Sora kept her eyes locked on Naomi. Kept reaching for her. Mrs. Chen knelt on Sora's other side. Tried to examine the ear. Pulled back when Sora flinched. The ambulance is 12 minutes out, someone said. 12 minutes. Naomi looked at the blood. At Sora's face. At the way her small fingers were digging into her own ear like she was trying to remove something that had been there too long. She thought about her brother. About 3 months of waiting for an appointment while an infection spread. About how sometimes 12 minutes was too long. She reached into her pocket. Felt the penlight. Her hands were shaking. There's something in her ear, Naomi said. Her voice cut through the noise. I've seen it. It's blocking everything. That's why she can't hear. The hallway went quiet. Park stared at her. What did you say? There's a blockage. Deep in the canal. I saw it when she stopped. Admitting she'd examined the child meant admitting she'd broken the rules. It's been there for years. The doctors missed it. Mrs. Chen's expression shifted. You looked in her ear? Yes. When? It doesn't matter when. What matters is, you touched Mr. Han's daughter? Park's voice was deadly quiet. After I specifically told you. She's in pain. Naomi's voice rose. She's been in pain for 7 years and nobody's listening to her. You're a maid, Park snapped. Not a doctor. You don't get to diagnose. Sora screamed. A real scream. Raw. Primal. The sound of agony that couldn't be contained anymore. Everyone froze. Because it was the first sound most of them had ever heard Sora make. The child who'd been silent since birth was screaming. Actually screaming. Her voice rough and unpracticed but there. Real. Echoing off marble walls in a house that had been built to contain silence. And then she grabbed Naomi's wrist. Pulled it toward her ear. The message was clear even without words. Help me. Mrs. Chen looked at Park. The ambulance is still 10 minutes out, Naomi said. She was breathing hard, heart hammering, every instinct screaming at her to act. I was a combat medic. Army. 3 deployments. I've done field extractions with less equipment than what's in the first aid kit down the hall. You're not touching her, Park said. Then she suffers for 10 more minutes. Naomi met his eyes. You want to explain to Mr. Han why you let his daughter bleed while help was standing right here. The calculation happened in Park's face. Risk assessment. Threat level. If he let the maid act and something went wrong, his fault. If he didn't and the child got worse, also his fault. What do you need? Mrs. Chen asked quietly. The first aid kit. Alcohol wipes. And everyone to step back so I have room to work. Park grabbed her arm. Hard. His grip was iron. If you hurt her, if you make this worse. I won't. You don't know that. No, Naomi said. But I know what I saw. And I know that blockage is what's causing this. Remove it, and she hears. Leave it, and, she looked at Sora, still crying, still bleeding. How long do you want her to suffer? Park held her arm for another 3 seconds. Then let go. Someone get the first aid kit, he said. And call Mr. Han. Tell him to get home. Now. Mrs. Chen ran. The security guards formed a perimeter. Not to protect Sora from threats. To protect Naomi from what would happen if she failed. Naomi knelt closer. Pulled out her penlight. Sora was still watching her. Still trusting her. Still believing that this stranger who'd held her hand and received her drawings would help when nobody else would. Please, Naomi prayed. Please let me be right. Mrs. Chen returned with the first aid kit. Hands shaking as she opened it. Pulled out alcohol wipes, gauze, tweezers. The tweezers were small, precise, surgical grade because everything in Daniel Han's house was the best money could buy. Except the one thing that mattered. Someone who would actually look. Naomi sterilized the tweezers, tested the penlight, took a breath that felt like it might be her last free one. I need her to stay very still, she said. Park knelt, held Sora's shoulders gently, spoke to her in Korean. Sora couldn't hear the words but understood the gesture. Trust us. Just a little longer. Naomi tilted Sora's head toward the hallway light. Shone the penlight into the ear canal. And there it was. Deep, dark, glistening, not wax, not debris, something alive. Her hands went cold. Oh my God, she whispered. What? Park's voice was tight. What is it? But Naomi couldn't answer. Because she was staring at something that shouldn't exist in a child's ear. Something that had been there for years. Growing, feeding, stealing sound and replacing it with agony. And every doctor who'd looked at Sora's scans had either missed it or ignored it. Naomi's mind raced through possibilities. Through training. Through memories of field hospitals and parasitic infections and things she'd pulled from wounds that made seasoned soldiers vomit. She looked at Park. Call that ambulance back. Tell them we need an infectious disease specialist on standby. What are you talking about? Just do it. Then she positioned the tweezers at the edge of the canal. Sora, she said, knowing the child couldn't hear but hoping she'd feel the intention. This is going to hurt. But then it's going to stop. I promise. Sora nodded. Small, trusting, brave in a way children shouldn't have to be. Naomi slid the tweezers in. Felt resistance. And knew, whatever came out of that ear would change everything. The tweezers slid deeper into Sora's ear canal. Naomi's hand was steady. Years of field medicine had trained that into her. But her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The penlight beam illuminated what the million-dollar specialists had missed. A mass. Dense. Dark. Glistening wet under the light. But it wasn't static. It moved. Just slightly. A pulsing motion that made Naomi's stomach turn. "Jesus Christ," one of the security guards whispered. Mrs. Chen made a sound between a gasp and a prayer. Park leaned closer, his grip on Sora's shoulders tightening. "What the hell is that?" Naomi's mind flashed back to Afghanistan. A village outside Kandahar. A local child brought to their field hospital with the same symptoms. Ear pain. Hearing loss. The senior medic had found it, a botfly larva that had burrowed into the ear canal and nested there for months. She'd watched him extract it. Watched the parents weep when their child heard them for the first time. But this was bigger, older, had been there so long it had calcified. Built a shell of dried blood and cerumen around itself like armor. "It's a parasite," Naomi said quietly. "Botfly larva, native to Central and South America. They don't naturally occur in California." The implications hit the hallway like a physical force. "You're saying someone put that in her?" Park's voice was deadly quiet. "I'm saying it didn't get there by accident." Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Then Mrs. Chen. "Can you remove it?" Naomi looked at the mass again. The tweezers were barely touching the edge. If she pulled wrong, if she ruptured the tissue or broke the larva inside the canal, she could cause permanent damage. Could make Sora's deafness truly irreversible. But if she didn't try, that thing would keep growing. Keep feeding. Keep stealing sound and replacing it with agony. "I can try," Naomi said. "That's not good enough," Park started, but Sora's hand shot out and grabbed Naomi's wrist. The child's eyes were open now, locked on Naomi's face. She couldn't hear the conversation. Couldn't understand the words being spoken above her. But she understood intention. And she nodded. Small. Deliberate. "Do it." Naomi took a breath. "I need everyone quiet. No movement. She has to stay perfectly still." The hallway went silent. Naomi adjusted the penlight. Positioned the tweezers at the precise angle. Her hand was steady but her mind was screaming through every possible complication. The larva was attached. She could see the microscopic hooks it had used to anchor itself to the canal wall. Could see how the surrounding tissue had swollen around it over years of chronic irritation. This wasn't going to be clean. This was going to hurt. "Sora," Naomi said, knowing the child couldn't hear but needing to say it anyway. "I'm so sorry." Then she hooked the tweezers around the calcified mass and pulled. Resistance. Immediate. Strong. The larva was fused to the tissue. 7 years of buildup had cemented it in place like a tumor that had become part of the body. Naomi applied steady pressure. Slow. Controlled. The kind of pull that gave tissue time to separate instead of tearing. Sora's body went rigid. Her mouth opened. A sound came out, halfway between a cry and a gasp, her voice rough and unpracticed but real. Park held her shoulders. Mrs. Chen gripped her hand. Naomi kept pulling. The resistance shifted. She felt something give way. Just slightly. Then more. The mass was sliding free. Millimeter by millimeter. Bringing with it debris and fluid and years of suffering that had been trapped inside a child's head. Sora's breathing came in sharp gasps. Tears streaming down her face. Her free hand clutching Mrs. Chen's with strength that seemed impossible for someone so small. Almost there. The larva was coming loose from the canal wall. Naomi could feel the final adhesion points breaking. Could feel the weight of it in the tweezers. One more pull. Steady. Careful. The mass slid free. It landed in Naomi's palm. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. They stared at the thing that had stolen 7 years of sound from a child. It was the size of a large grape, covered in a hardened shell of dried blood and cerumen that had built up over years. But underneath the crust, visible through a translucent membrane, was something that made trained security guards step back. The larva, pale, segmented, thick as a pencil, covered in tiny hooks that had kept it anchored. And it was moving, curling, uncurling, sensing air for the first time in 7 years. Alive. Mrs. Chen turned away, hand over her mouth. One security guard actually vomited. Park stared at it, his face drained of color. that was inside her? Naomi grabbed a specimen cup from the first aid kit with shaking hands. Sealed the thing inside before anyone could process what they'd seen. Someone call Cedars-Sinai, she said, her voice barely steady. Tell them we need an entomologist and an infectious disease specialist. Now. But she wasn't looking at the adults. She was looking at Sora. The child had gone completely still. Not from pain. From something else. Her eyes were wide, moving, tracking sounds she'd never heard before. The click of the specimen cup closing. Mrs. Chen's ragged breathing. Park's voice on his phone calling for medical support. The hum of the air conditioning. The distant crash of ocean waves through open windows. Sound. Sora's hand slowly moved to her throat. Touched it. Felt the vibration of her own breathing. Her mouth opened. And she whispered one word. Rough. Unpracticed. The voice of someone speaking for the first time. Loud. The hallway erupted. Mrs. Chen sobbed openly. Security guards stared in disbelief. Park froze mid-sentence on his phone call. Because Sora Han, the child who'd been silent since birth, had just spoken. Had just heard herself speak. Sora's face was a storm of confusion and wonder and terror. She touched her ears. Both of them. Like they were new. Like someone had replaced them with ears that actually worked. She turned toward Mrs. Chen's crying. Heard it. Turned toward Park's voice on the phone. Heard that too. Her head swiveled toward the window. Toward the sound of waves that had been crashing against those cliffs every day of her life without ever reaching her. She was hearing the world for the first time. And it was overwhelming her. Too much. Too loud. Too everything. Her hands flew up to cover her ears. Her face crumpled. She started crying, actually crying with sound, sobs that were messy and raw and beautiful because they were real. Naomi reached for her but stopped. Because footsteps were thundering up the driveway. The front door slammed open. And Daniel Han's voice, loud enough to shake the chandelier, cut through everything. Where is my daughter? Right here. This is the moment that changes everything. If you've stayed with us this long, drop a comment. Tell me, would you have taken that risk? Would you have pulled it out? Because what happens next, when Daniel sees what Naomi did, either ends in gratitude or violence. Stay with me. Park appeared at the top of the stairs. Sir, there's been. But Daniel was already moving. Taking stairs 3 at a time. Face twisted with panic and rage. He hit the second floor and saw his daughter. On the floor. Surrounded by staff. Blood on her ear. A stranger kneeling beside her holding something in a specimen cup. And Sora, crying. With sound. Daniel froze. Stared at his daughter like he'd never seen her before. Because he hadn't. He'd never heard her cry. Never heard her voice. Never heard proof that she existed in the same world of sound that he did. Sora? His voice cracked on her name. And Sora's head turned. Toward his voice. She'd heard him. Her eyes found her father's face. Tears still streaming. Overwhelmed and terrified and hearing too much too fast. She opened her mouth. One word. The first word she'd ever spoken to him. Appa. Korean for father. Rough. Broken. Perfect. Daniel's legs buckled. He dropped to his knees on marble that had cost more per square foot than most people's cars. Reached for his daughter with hands that were shaking. And Sora, small, fragile, overwhelmed Sora, crawled into his arms and pressed her face against his chest. Heard his heartbeat for the first time. Heard him whisper her name over and over in Korean. Heard the world her mother had lived in before silence took it away. Daniel held his daughter and cried. Actually cried. Tears that 7 years of grief hadn't been able to pull out of him. And Naomi. Naomi stood slowly. Specimen cup in hand. Blood on her fingers. Career probably over. Freedom probably gone. But watching that father hold his daughter. Hearing that child's voice for the first time. She didn't regret a single second. Park was already moving toward her. Security closing in. She'd broken the rules. Touched the child. Done the unforgivable. But before Park could reach her, Daniel's voice stopped everything. Wait. One word. Quiet. Absolute. Park froze. Daniel looked up. His face was wet. Destroyed. Rebuilt. His eyes found Naomi's. And for a long moment, crime lord and maid just stared at each other. Two people from different worlds. Connected by one impossible moment. What did you do? Daniel whispered. Naomi held up the specimen cup. Showed him what had been stolen from his daughter. What had been there all along while doctors charged millions and did nothing? Daniel stared at the thing in the cup. Then at Naomi. Then at his daughter, who was touching her ears and whispering, loud, over and over like she'd discovered magic. And something in Daniel Hahn's carefully controlled face shattered completely. The hospital room at Cedars-Sinai smelled like antiseptic and fear. Daniel hadn't left Sora's side in 6 hours. Sat in the chair next to her bed like a statue. Watching her sleep. Watching the monitors that confirmed what he still couldn't believe. His daughter could hear. The specialists had come and gone. Entomologists. Infectious disease doctors. Surgeons who looked at the specimen cup with expressions that shifted from disbelief to horror to shame. Dermatobia hominis. Human botfly. Native to Central and South America. Does not naturally occur in California infants. The head specialist, Drive. Morrison, gray-haired and expensive, had pulled Daniel aside and delivered the news in a voice that shook. Mr. Hahn, this wasn't medical negligence. This was assault. Someone placed that larva in your daughter's ear when she was an infant. The scans we have on file from 7 years ago, he pulled up images on his tablet. Pointed to a shadow. We documented this. Called it anatomical irregularity. Classified it as too risky to investigate surgically. Daniel's voice was ice. You saw it and did nothing? We saw a shadow, not a foreign body. The imaging suggested it was fused nerve tissue. Given the risk of permanent damage from exploratory surgery. My daughter lived in silence for 7 years because you didn't look close enough. Dr. Morrison's face went pale. Mr. Hahn, I understand you're upset. Get out. The doctor left. Daniel sat back down beside Sora's bed. Someone had done this to her. Someone had planted that thing inside his infant daughter's ear and let her suffer. Let her grow up deaf while he threw millions at specialists who either didn't see or didn't care. His hands clenched into fists. He wanted names, wanted blood, wanted to make whoever did this understand what 7 years of stolen sound cost. But first, he had to deal with the woman who'd saved his daughter. Naomi sat in a different waiting room 3 floors down. Still wearing her maid's uniform. Still had dried blood on her hands from the extraction. Security guard at the door making sure she didn't leave. She hadn't been arrested. Hadn't been thanked either. Just isolated. Contained. While Daniel decided what to do with her. She'd been there for 4 hours when Park finally came to get her. Mr. Hahn wants to see you. Naomi stood on legs that had gone numb from sitting. Followed Park through hallways that were too bright and too clean. Hospital staff stared as they passed. Word had spread about what happened. About the maid who'd done what doctors couldn't. Park stopped outside a private conference room. He's inside. You don't speak unless he asks you a question. You don't make excuses. You tell the truth. Understand? Naomi nodded. Park opened the door. Daniel Hahn sat at the head of a mahogany table. Suit jacket off. Tie loosened. He looked like he'd aged a decade in 6 hours. When he looked up at Naomi, his eyes were red. Sit, he said quietly. She sat. The silence stretched. Daniel studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as staff. Not as help. As the person who'd knelt on his marble floor and pulled a living nightmare from his daughter's ear. The doctors say Sora will make a full recovery, he said finally. The infection is treatable. The hearing loss was entirely mechanical. Once the blockage was removed, his voice caught. She can hear everything. Naomi said nothing. They also say if that larva had stayed in place another 6 months, it would have caused permanent damage. Brain infection. Possibly death. Daniel's hands were flat on the table. Perfectly still. You saved my daughter's life. I did what anyone should have done, Naomi said quietly. No. Daniel's voice hardened. You did what no one else had the courage to do. Specialists who charge thousands per hour missed it. Nurses who've worked here for decades never questioned the diagnosis. He stopped. You saw it. In what, 2 weeks? 3 weeks. You saw what I couldn't see. What people with medical degrees didn't see. What everyone told me was impossible. He leaned forward. Why? Naomi met his eyes. Because I wasn't looking at scans. I was looking at your daughter. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. I had a brother, Naomi continued. Same thing. Different problem. Doctors kept saying it was nothing until it was almost too late. I learned, sometimes you have to trust what you see over what you're told. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then, you broke the rules. Park warned you not to touch Sora. Mrs. Chen told you to stay invisible. You did it anyway. Yes. Why? You needed this job. You knew what would happen if you overstepped. Naomi's throat tightened. I have a son, 12 years old, lives with my sister in Detroit. I took this job to prove I'm stable enough to get custody back. Losing it means losing him. She paused. But watching your daughter suffer when I knew how to help, I couldn't live with that either. So you chose her over your own child. I chose to do what was right, even if it cost me everything. Daniel stared at her. Then he did something Naomi never expected. He stood, walked around the table, and extended his hand. Thank you, he said, for seeing my daughter when I couldn't. Naomi shook his hand. His grip was firm. Final. You're not fired, Daniel said. But you're not a maid anymore either. Naomi's heart stopped. Sir? You saw a threat I missed. You acted when everyone else froze. You have instincts I need. Daniel released her hand. As of today, you work for me directly. Security consultant. Your job is to see what others don't. To question what we assume. To protect Sora from threats I'm too blind to recognize. I'm not qualified. You pulled a parasite from my daughter's ear with tweezers and a penlight. You're more qualified than anyone I've ever hired. His voice dropped. Salary is $200,000 a year. You and your son move into the guest house tomorrow. Private school for him. Security detail for both of you. Full benefits. Naomi couldn't breathe. Why? Because I don't forget debts. And I owe you everything. And if I say no? Daniel's expression didn't change. Then you walk out of here with severance pay and a reference letter. No threats. No retaliation. But, he paused. Whoever put that thing in Sora's ear is still out there. And they know she can hear now. They know their plan failed. Which makes her a target again. The implications settled over Naomi like ice water. You're saying she's in danger. I'm saying I need someone who actually looks at her. Who sees threats before they become tragedies. Someone who proved she'll risk everything to keep my daughter safe. Daniel met her eyes. That's you. Naomi thought about Malik. About custody battles and stability and the life she'd been fighting for. Thought about Sora's face when she heard her father's voice for the first time. Thought about whoever had planted that larva and what they might do next. My son, she said quietly. He moves in tomorrow? You're sure? I'll have my lawyers handle the custody paperwork. If your sister objects, they'll make it go away. It was a gilded cage. Beautiful. Secure. But still a cage. Once she accepted, she'd belong to Daniel Han's world. His empire. His darkness. But Malik would be safe. Sora would be protected. And maybe, just maybe, she could do some good before the darkness swallowed her completely. Okay, Naomi said. I'll do it. Daniel nodded once. Good. Welcome to the family. He said it like a blessing. But Naomi heard the warning underneath. Family in Daniel Han's world didn't mean love. It meant loyalty. It meant complicity. It meant there was no walking away. 3 weeks passed in Daniel Han's new world. Naomi and Malik moved into the guest house, a structure larger than any home Naomi had ever lived in. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, windows overlooking the ocean. Malik couldn't believe it. Mom, this is ours? For real? She nodded. Didn't tell him the price. Didn't explain that luxury came with chains you couldn't see until you tried to leave. Her son was safe, fed, enrolled in a private school where teachers actually noticed when kids were struggling. That was enough. It had to be enough. But Naomi's new role wasn't what she'd expected. Daniel's men taught her the security systems, showed her camera feeds, explained threat assessment protocols. She learned to recognize cars that circled the property twice. Learned which delivery drivers were regular and which were new. Learned that Daniel's world operated on suspicion and violence held barely in check. And she learned about the investigation. Daniel was hunting whoever planted that larva in Sora's ear. He'd pulled old staff records, security footage from 7 years ago, financial records of everyone who'd had access to infant Sora. The list was long. Housekeepers, nannies, tutors, medical staff, delivery personnel, even family friends who'd visited after Yuna's death. Any one of them could have done it. Daniel's method was systematic, brutal. People were called in for interviews that lasted hours. Asked questions about their whereabouts, their finances, their connections. Park's team ran background checks that went back decades. 3 former staff members had disappeared after their interviews. Naomi didn't ask what happened to them. But she saw the look on Daniel's face when he crossed names off his list. Cold, surgical, the expression of a man who'd stop at nothing. One night, Naomi found him in his office at 2 a.m. staring at photographs spread across his desk. "Can't sleep?" she asked from the doorway. Daniel didn't look up. "Someone hurt my daughter. Stole 7 years from her. I need to know who." Naomi stepped closer. Saw the photos. Young woman. Korean. Beautiful. Wearing a housekeeper's uniform in some shots. Standing beside infant Sora in others. Who is she? Lee Min-seo, head housekeeper 7 years ago. Quit suddenly 3 months after Sora's deafness was diagnosed. No forwarding address. No references requested. Just disappeared. You think she did it? I think she had access. Opportunity. And she left when questions should have been asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. Park tracked her to Koreatown. Found employment records at a restaurant. Then nothing. Like she vanished. Or someone made her vanish. Daniel finally looked at her. "What do you mean?" Naomi picked up one of the photos. Studied Min-seo's face. If someone paid her to plant that larva, someone with resources, they'd want to erase the trail. Dead women can't testify. The thought hung between them. "You think she's dead," Daniel said. "I think whoever orchestrated this was thorough. And thorough people don't leave witnesses." Daniel stood, walked to the window. The ocean was black under moonlight. Endless. Unforgiving. "When I find who did this." "What then?" Naomi interrupted. "You kill them?" "Yes." No hesitation. No doubt. Naomi's stomach turned. "That won't bring back the 7 years. No. But it'll make sure they never hurt anyone else. It'll make you a murderer." Daniel turned. His eyes were flat. Empty. "I've been a murderer, Naomi. This won't be my first." The confession sat between them like a body neither could move. "Sora deserves better than a father with more blood on his hands," Naomi said quietly. "Sora deserves safety. That's what I'm buying with blood. You can't protect her from everything. Watch me." The conversation ended there. But that night, lying in her new bed in her new prison, Naomi realized something terrifying. She was becoming complicit, not just in Daniel's hunt for revenge, but in the logic that made it possible. Someone had hurt a child. Someone had stolen years of sound and replaced them with suffering. And part of her, the part that had knelt on marble and pulled a living nightmare from a little girl's ear, wanted them punished too. Wanted them to hurt the way Sora had hurt. Wanted justice that looked a lot like violence. She was changing. Daniel's world was changing her. And she didn't know if she could stop it. 2 days later, Park found something. Security footage from a medical supply company that had serviced the Han mansion 7 years ago. Grainy. Old. But clear enough. Min-seo accepting a package at the service entrance. Opening it after the delivery driver left. Pulling out something small. Sealed in plastic. Looking directly at the camera, just for a second, before walking inside. Her expression was guilt. Fear. Resignation. The expression of someone who'd made a choice and knew it was wrong but did it anyway. Park froze the frame. Enhanced Min-seo's face. "Found her," he said to Daniel. "Seoul. Living under her mother's maiden name. Working at a textile factory." Daniel's hands clenched. "Book a flight. Sir, if you go to Korea. Book the flight." Naomi watched this happen from the doorway. Watched Daniel prepare to cross an ocean for revenge. Watched herself stay silent. Watched the moment she could have stopped him pass by. And realized. She'd already made her choice. She'd chosen Sora's safety over her own morality. Chosen protection over principle. Chosen to become what she'd once feared. Someone who looked the other way while violence was planned. Daniel left for Seoul that night. Naomi stayed behind with Malik and Sora. Kept them safe. Kept them innocent. While somewhere across the Pacific, a father hunted the woman who'd hurt his daughter. And Naomi prayed that Daniel would find restraint before he found Min-seo. But she didn't believe he would. Daniel called from Seoul at 3 a.m. California time. Naomi answered on the second ring. Heart already racing because calls at this hour only meant one thing. "I found her," Daniel said. His voice was hollow, exhausted. The voice of a man who'd crossed an ocean fueled by rage and found something worse than an enemy. "Found a victim. Is she alive?" Naomi asked. Yes. Silence on the line, long enough that Naomi thought the call had dropped. Daniel? She didn't do it willingly. His voice cracked. They threatened her family. Her younger sister had cancer. Needed treatment they couldn't afford. Someone, she won't say who, offered her $50,000. All she had to do was place something in Sora's ear while changing her diaper. Said it was a tracking device. Something harmless that would dissolve in a few months. Naomi's stomach dropped. She didn't know it was a larva. She knew it was wrong. But her sister was dying. Daniel's breath was ragged. What would you have done, Naomi? If Malik was dying and someone offered you money to do something that seemed harmless? The question sat between them like an accusation. Who paid her? Naomi asked. She doesn't know. Money came through an intermediary. Untraceable. Probably one of my rivals trying to distract me. Keep me focused on Sora's condition instead of business. It worked. What are you going to do? Another long silence. I don't know. 3 words that carried the weight of 7 years. The Daniel Hahn I've heard about doesn't hesitate, Naomi said carefully. The Daniel Hahn you've heard about didn't have someone save his daughter's life by choosing mercy over rules. His voice was rough. You risked everything for Sora. Didn't ask for permission. Didn't wait for authority. Just acted because it was right. Even when it could have destroyed you. That's different, is it? Min Seo made a choice too. Wrong choice. Desperate choice. But she thought she was saving her sister. Daniel exhaled slowly. If I kill her, if I become what everyone expects, what does that teach Sora? That power means you can destroy anyone who wrongs you. Naomi sat up in bed. This wasn't the man she'd expected. She's heard your voice now, Naomi said quietly. She knows you exist in the same world she does. What kind of father does she need you to be? Not a killer. Then don't be one. Daniel was quiet for so long Naomi thought he'd hung up. Then, I'm paying for her sister's treatment. Full remission care. And I'm giving her money to disappear. New identity. New country. But she gives me the name of the intermediary first. And if the intermediary leads to your rival? Then I handle it differently. Legal channels. Financial pressure. I destroy their business, not their body. His voice hardened. But Min Seo gets to live. Gets to know someone showed her mercy even when she didn't deserve it. Naomi felt something release in her chest. You're doing the right thing. Am I? Or am I just weak? You're being human. That's harder. Another silence. Naomi, thank you for reminding me what matters. The call ended. Naomi sat in the dark of her bedroom, hands shaking. Daniel Hahn had crossed an ocean ready to kill. And chose restraint instead. Because someone had shown him that rules could be broken for the right reasons. That mercy was stronger than vengeance. That the person you became mattered more than the punishment you delivered. She'd saved more than Sora's hearing that day on the marble floor. She'd saved Daniel's humanity. And maybe, just maybe, her own. 3 days later, Daniel returned. Exhausted. Changed. He went straight to Sora's room. Found her drawing at her desk. Headphones on, listening to music she'd discovered in the weeks he'd been gone. She saw him and pulled the headphones off. Appa, you're home. Her voice still rough. Still learning inflection. But getting stronger every day. Daniel knelt. Pulled her into a hug that lasted longer than usual. I'm home, he whispered. And I'm not leaving again. Promise? Promise. Sora pulled back. Looked at his face with those 2 old eyes. You look sad. Are you okay? Daniel managed a smile. I'm better now. That night, he found Naomi in the guest house. Malik was already asleep. The house was quiet except for ocean waves crashing in the distance. I need you to know something, Daniel said. Naomi set down the book she'd been pretending to read. The intermediary gave up a name. Lee Jin-ho, one of my father's old associates. Someone I've known my entire life. Daniel's jaw tightened. He orchestrated it because he thought I was weak after Yuna died. Thought if Sora was damaged, I'd lose focus. He could take over the business. What are you going to do? What I should have done years ago. Cut him out completely. Freeze his assets. Destroy his reputation. But I'm not killing him. Daniel met her eyes. You taught me that. I didn't teach you anything. You did. You showed me that doing what's right costs everything. But it's still worth it. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Set it on the table. What's this? Deed to the guest house. It's yours. Fully paid. No strings. If you ever want to leave, if my world becomes too dark, you can. You and Malik will always have a home. Always have security. But you're not trapped. Naomi stared at the envelope. Freedom. Real freedom. Given by a man who'd learned that holding too tight destroyed what you were trying to protect. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel nodded once, then left. And Naomi sat alone with proof that even criminals could change. That even darkness could learn to choose light. That sometimes, the most dangerous thing you could do, was show someone mercy when they expected violence. Because mercy had power that violence never would. It could transform. 6 months after the extraction, Daniel Hahn did something unprecedented. He threw open the gates. The Sora Hahn Foundation launched on a Saturday in October. Not in some private boardroom, but at the mansion, transformed into a venue where Los Angeles's elite were forced to witness what they'd ignored. Medical negligence in marginalized communities. Children suffering while doctors looked past the obvious. Families spending fortunes on specialists who never bothered to truly see. The ballroom was packed. Politicians, business leaders, media, and sitting in reserved seats at the front, the doctors from Cedars-Sinai who'd examined Sora over 7 years and missed what a maid saw in 3 weeks. They looked uncomfortable. Good. Daniel took the stage with Sora beside him. She wore a blue dress. Headphones around her neck, she carried them everywhere now, still overwhelmed by how loud the world could be. My daughter was deaf for 7 years, Daniel said into the microphone. His voice carried across the room. I spent $3.7 million trying to fix what everyone said was unfixable. Flew to 5 countries. Consulted with specialists whose credentials could fill this room. He paused. Let that sink in. They all missed it. All of them. Because they looked at scans instead of my daughter. They saw dollar signs instead of suffering. They accepted the diagnosis and moved on. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. One person saw what they missed. She had no medical degree. No fancy clinic. Just eyes that actually looked and a heart that couldn't ignore pain. Daniel gestured toward the wings. Naomi stepped onto the stage. She'd tried to refuse. Told Daniel she didn't need recognition. But he'd insisted. Some of you deserve to see the truth, he'd said. Now she stood beside him in a dress that still felt foreign. Facing a room full of people who'd never looked at her twice when she was cleaning their bathrooms at charity events. This is Naomi Carter, Daniel said. Former combat medic. Current director of medical advocacy for the Sora Hahn Foundation. She saved my daughter's life by doing what every specialist in this room should have done. She looked. The applause started. Polite at first, then building. Sora stepped forward, took the microphone with small hands that still shook slightly when she spoke in public. I lived in quiet for 7 years, she said. Her voice was clearer now. Stronger. Not because I was broken. Because nobody looked close enough. Naomi looked. She saw me. Her eyes found Naomi's. She risked everything to help me. Lost her job. Almost lost her son. Did it anyway. Tears were streaming down faces in the audience now. The foundation will help other kids like me. Kids whose doctors stop looking. Whose families can't afford better answers. We're hiring nurses like Naomi. People who see past the diagnosis. Who remember that patients aren't problems to solve, they're people to save. Daniel took the microphone back. The Foundation's first initiative, free secondary examinations for any child diagnosed with permanent conditions. No insurance required, no questions asked. Because I never want another parent to spend 7 years in silence when the answer was always there. He looked directly at the Cedars-Sinai doctors in the front row. And to the medical professionals who missed what was right in front of them, the foundation will also fund accountability reviews. Starting with my daughter's case. The doctors went pale. The room erupted in applause. After the gala, Naomi found herself surrounded by families. Parents with children who'd been dismissed. Misdiagnosed. Told to accept the unacceptable. Will you look at my son? Can the foundation help us? Please, nobody listens. She stayed until midnight. Took names. Made promises. Felt the weight of hope that shouldn't rest on one person's shoulders. Daniel found her in the emptying ballroom. You okay? Naomi looked at the specimen cup displayed in a glass case near the entrance. The larva preserved inside. A reminder of what almost destroyed Sora. I saved one child, she said quietly. They want me to save hundreds. So we hire more people like you. Train them. Build something that lasts. Daniel's voice was steady. You showed me that one person choosing to see can change everything. Now we multiply that. A man in an expensive suit approached. FBI credentials in his hand. Mr. Hahn. Ms. Carter. Moment of your time? Daniel's expression didn't change. Not tonight. It's important. About your business operations. I said not tonight. Daniel's voice dropped to something dangerous. This is my daughter's event. You want to talk business? Call my lawyers Monday. The agent's eyes shifted to Naomi. Ms. Carter, when you're ready to discuss what you've witnessed in this household, we're here. He left a card on the table. Walked away. Naomi stared at the card. FBI. Financial Crimes Division. They were watching Daniel. Watching her. Waiting for the moment she'd choose law over loyalty. Daniel saw the card. Didn't touch it. They've been circling for years, he said quietly. Eventually they'll find something. Or create something. He looked at her. When that day comes, you take Malik and you leave. Use the deed. Start over. Don't let my choices destroy your future. You're planning for your own arrest? I'm planning for reality. My world has consequences. I won't let them touch you. Naomi picked up the FBI card. Slipped it into her purse. Not because she'd use it. But because having options meant she wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was choosing to stay. And that made all the difference. 1 year after the extraction, Sora performed her first concert. Not at the mansion. At her school's winter showcase. In front of parents and teachers and kids who'd never known her when she was silent. She chose a Korean folk song. The one her mother used to sing. Naomi sat in the audience between Daniel and Malik. Watching a child who'd lived 7 years without sound stand on stage and use her voice. Sora's hands were shaking. She touched her ear once, old habit, then dropped her hand. Took a breath. And sang. Her voice wasn't perfect. Still learning pitch. Still finding control. But it was hers. Earned through suffering. Through years of silence. Through one stranger's choice to risk everything. Daniel was crying. Didn't bother hiding it anymore. Malik leaned toward Naomi. You did that, Mom. You gave her that. Naomi shook her head. Couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Because she hadn't given Sora anything. She'd just looked when everyone else stopped looking. Saw when everyone else stopped seeing. Acted when everyone else accepted. After the performance, Sora found them in the lobby. Threw her arms around Naomi. Thank you, she whispered. For hearing me when I had no voice. And Naomi understood. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting. It's seeing someone else's pain, really seeing it, and refusing to look away. Even when it costs you everything. Especially then. Because that's when it matters most. We want to hear from you. If this story reminded you that one person's courage can change everything, drop a comment. Tell us about someone who saw you when everyone else looked away. Who showed up when it was hard. Who chose to help even when it cost them. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, stories about the power of actually looking, actually seeing, actually caring, then subscribe. Because we're just getting started. Share this with someone who needs to know, your voice matters. Your pain matters. You matter. Even when the world is loud and you feel silent. Someone is listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next story.